right, everybody, not to prolong the time, and we want to give Jeanene all of her time. Happy Friday to you. Good morning and afternoon, depending where you're located. My name is Lisa Sims, and I'm a lead faculty in the Technology Studies Department at the University of Arizona Global Campus. And I am pleased that you are joining us today. Our session leader is going to be Jeanene Zagajeski, better known as Zag, and her presentation is going to be on the psychological safety, practical skills for real teams. And we're going to hold questions and answers at the end of the presentation. And so now I'm going to hand it over to Zag.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you to the summit for having me here today. This topic is highly important to me. I grew up in an environment without psychological safety. And it's kind of become my mission to teach people about it. I have 15 years working side by side with management coaches, and we've seen it from small businesses to large businesses. And most of our time is spent teaching people how to do this. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So credentials on the screen. My birthday was last week and I turned 56. So there's a lot more that I could fit on this page. But what you need to know more than anything else about me is that how important this is. Everything when you're building a relationship comes down to communication. And you can't have communication without psychological safety. And that is one piece of the puzzle that so many people leave out. Next slide, please. So when I wrote out my speaker notes for today's presentation, I treated it like a class assignment. And after the last 2 days in the summit and what I've learned, I came to the conclusion that they're wrong for this event. So I'm going to do something that every coach will tell you not to do when you're doing something for the very first time. And we're going off script today. We will be following this agenda, but we're going to be looking at the situation differently than I originally planned. I am here to connect with you, to show you these things, not give a lecture. So my stumbling, please forgive me. That's what's going to happen with us today. So next slide, please. We cannot talk about a concept unless we're going by the same definition. So what is psychological safety? There's a lot of history, a lot of theories, a lot of interdiscipline work. But what I was trying to say with this slide is this isn't new. We've been studying this from different aspects in different areas. Today's viewpoint is going to be from the person experiencing a lapse in psychological safety. That is what is going to be the key to understand. Next slide, please. Sorry, I'm shaking so bad, I'm having a hard time using my mouse. So why does this matter for our Culture of Care Summit and our Culture of Care at UAGC specifically? Care values don't work with just intention. You can want to have psychological safety in your environment, but the want isn't going to get you anywhere. Empathy, reliability, and competency only become credible when people feel safe enough to speak, to ask questions, to admit something, to disagree. When that can occur, that's when you get trust, openness, respect, learning. All of the things that we have been talking about for the last 2 days. And underneath all of that, communication and connection. Next slide, please. When you're talking about psychology, sociology, things like that, you do not have neat boxes. There is overlap. There are exceptions to every rule. But when trying to explain the theory, we're going to break it down into groups of 4. In this case, it's the 4 fear labels. These are your main bucket areas of types of fear that people can experience. Fear of exclusion is when your sense of belonging feels uncertain. When you feel that fear, you start monitoring acceptance. You start looking for proof, normally to the negative, but honestly, either way. What you see in others when they're experiencing that, they go quiet. They don't ask questions. And it's all from the fear of being pushed even further outside the group. Fear of failure. A lot of us here are or have been university students. We understand the fear of failure. But it can show up in other ways than the obvious. When the pressure to succeed feels high, but your ability feels uncertain for whatever reason, you become cautious, you over-control. You spend 12 hours writing one paragraph that you end up throwing away at the last minute, like I did this morning. You're trying to protect yourself from those feelings. Fear of judgment is a fear of how they're going to react to what you did, versus fear of failure is what you actually did. There's a difference on what lens we're looking through again. Here's where the feelings of blame, embarrassment, criticism, loss of credibility. This creates an ambiguity which becomes even more dangerous and can keep pushing you the wrong direction that you need to actually solve the problem. The 4th one is the one I've actually seen the most, which looking back kind of surprises me. But in all the companies I've worked with, the fear of challenging the status quo has been the biggest hurdle for people to get over, my experience. This is when, if you spoke honestly, the structure is going to fracture, or at least that's your perception. It may not be reality, but that's the perception. And while these 4 groups are not, as I said, all-encompassing or that clear cut, there is a reason for the 4. And we're going to come back to that in a moment. Next slide, please. So we started with fear because you have to be able to recognize it before you can start to solve it. And the 5 simple manager moves, as it's taught in management training. I don't really like that wording. I see it as these are the habits you need to build if you truly want an environment with psychological safety. Ask questions. Never assume. Ask. You mess up, admit to it. You know what that does? Other people become more willing to admit mistakes. Clear communication, better relationships. Number 3, frame it as learning. This is one I teach to everyone. And I mean kids, parents, people in leadership. Doesn't matter. When a situation happens, you do not look for the blame. You look for how to keep it from happening again. It doesn't matter whose fault it was. That doesn't solve anything. Oh, it was John's fault. Well, cool. So, and next time, if you keep it focused on how to keep the situation from reoccurring, people's defensiveness goes down because they're no longer having that fear of being blamed pop up. Now, management leadership teaches turn taking, make a space for every voice. But in some of our summits, presentations this couple of days, we've been reminded that that doesn't look the same for every person. I've become okay being called upon in meetings, but please don't do it without warning me that it might happen. Not everybody feels comfortable speaking up in front of a group. And if your group has members like that, how you fulfill that part is going to them privately. And just, did you have, from the meeting earlier, I noticed you didn't talk. Did you have anything you wanted to add? That's all it takes. And then, well, why I'm in a sweatshirt in an Arizona summertime. Everybody is a human being. They're all walking their own paths. You don't know what they're dealing with. But generally speaking, everybody wants to be heard. And if you're trying to create psychological safety, help them. Not just you listen, but help them to be heard. Next slide. So here's where I'm really going to go off script. If you are right now multitasking, I don't blame you. I've done it myself over the last 2 days, I'll admit to it. But I'm going to ask everyone to please try to just focus on a situation I'm about to give to you. Because what I'm going to ask you at the end of it is, how did you feel? 3 situations. Here's the first one. You are filling out medical paperwork for your child who has food sensitivity issues. They are underweight and have been seeing a specialist. You got new insurance, new doctors, have to do the intake forms. These days it's on computers, so you're clicking boxes or, short entry. Form asks for your child's weight. Ask for your child's height. Asks you to click boxes on how many different foods they eat. If you are a parent that has been involved in the family court system, CPS, anything like that, you might be feeling a little tense right now. If you've never been in that situation, you're sitting here going, why? See, the record now contains information that makes you look like a bad parent. And there hasn't been a place for you to explain the situation. That is fear. The threat of being judged on incomplete information. Understanding that is key. More broadly, applying this to our communication, how do you feel when you're in the middle of your workday and you receive a text from your spouse, your partner, your child that just says, we need to talk? Yeah, that ambiguity just kills all the trust. Second scenario. Your company has just been purchased by a larger company. The owner of your original company announced that no one would be laid off. So you're trying to trust the transition. Change is scary, but it's okay. Then you receive a meeting invitation with your new peers. Okay, that's a good sign, right? Once the meeting starts, you realize that no one else from your original company has been included. As the discussion moves forward, nobody's talking to you. Nobody's looking at you. No one asks for your perspective. No one asks about your prior experience or what you did at the other company. How's your nervous system right now? Feeling a bit uneasy? Not sure of your place in the world? If you feel anything else, please drop it in the chat. You've been technically included, but you're really not feeling it. And this is the fear of exclusion. It doesn't have to be overt. It can be this subtle. A person can be invited, listed, copied, present in the room, and still receive the message that they don't belong. The fix is to make it visible, to go out of your way to include them, to understand that they might need other information that your group knows, but they don't. Be aware and act on it. It's, again, pretty simple. So, situation 3. And this one is really for the students. It's the first week of a new class, and the first assignment has been posted. The instructions say to research a topic and write a paper. And that's pretty much it. There's no guidance on what topic's acceptable, how long the paper should be, what format to use, what kind of sources, how it'll be graded. How do you feel? Little nervous? Little unsure? For most students, the pressure arises immediately. Just seeing that instant, oh my gosh, what do I do? The assignment sounds simple. Pick a topic and write a paper. What else do you need to know? You're university students. But when you're being asked to perform without knowing the goal, every choice you make feels risky. That's the fear of failure. In this example, it's just, a poorly designed assignment. Or it also could be a great experiment, depending on, what class this is occurring in. I could see that as an experiment in a class. But in general, the fix is to define the performance before it begins. We do that here with rubrics, with the instructions. But in general, you state the topic, the boundaries, the length, the format. You have to give a person enough information to do a task before you can expect them to do it. So shake off those stressful feelings, because we're going to move on to the positive side of all of this. So next slide, please. So I told you a few slides ago, remember the number 4. Now, I really don't want anybody to panic at this next sentence. But I want you to remember when you first learned how to do simple algebra, something like 4x plus 16 equals 36. And if you're as old as I am, the old school method would be to then subtract 16 from this side, 16 from this side, divide by 4, and you just go back and forth. I know, math, scary, but that concept of working back and forth is what I'm trying to show you here. I showed you the 4 fears. This is the opposite. When that fear doesn't exist, this is what you get. And when you're trying to find areas where psychological safety is lacking, this is how you do it. You look for fear behavior, you look for these successes, and you go back and forth until you can define where an issue is or isn't happening. So we talked about, not belonging. When you feel safe, it's the opposite. When you feel safe to grow, you ask questions. When you feel safe to offer ideas, when you feel safe to challenge the status quo. It's the opposite of the 4 fears. Next slide, please. We went through 3 situations with 3 simple solutions, simple in theory, not necessarily in practice. If you have somebody filling out a form, give them a spot to add information, just an optional text box. That's all it takes to relieve that fear. If you want people to feel wanted, belonging, then do those little acts. Welcome them. Go out of your way to speak with them. And then, of course, don't expect somebody to do something right if you don't tell them how to do it in the first place. Those 3 examples you can walk out of here with. But what I want to give you more of is how to find those problems. Gave you the 4 fears and the 4 solutions and told you to work back and forth. But that's theory. That doesn't really give you the practical tools that I'm trying to share. Some things are obvious. Repeated complaints. If repeated customers, employees, students, you get multiple people making the same complaints, then there's probably a problem somewhere. Doesn't say where, but it does indicate a problem. If you're putting out an assignment and you're noticing that one assignment, you're always getting emails asking questions on it, might want to review your instructions for clarity. If people are afraid to say when there's a problem, they don't feel safe. When people immediately respond defensively, they don't feel safe. And of course, laying blame, deflecting, but all of that you can normally see, and it can normally lead you to where to go to address it. But you need to look harder on the less obvious ones. I know, redundant definition, I get it. But when does the silence occur? Who does the silence occur around? Is there more chatter outside of the meeting than inside of the meeting? Those are little yellow orangey flags to take a look at. There's talk during meetings, but nobody ever offers a different opinion. Nobody questions. Nobody ever says, I don't think that's a good idea. It's the absence of questions that you're seeing there. My favorite, fake agreement. Oh yeah, that sounds great, let's do that. And crickets, consistently. Why? Where is the fear in that situation? Back to, withholding questions, withholding feedback, and conflict avoidance. And I could do a whole hour on that one. And I want to make sure we have time for questions, so I'm not going to. But it's all types of conflict avoidance, not just the obvious ones of that person always rubs me the wrong way, so I'm just going to avoid them. It comes out in, well, I'm not going to bother to report it because nothing ever happens. Those are hard to see. If you don't report it, how do we know it happened? pay attention to not just what is occurring, but what is not occurring is the bottom line for the less office. And hopefully your mind's ticking a few things, has a few questions about your teams right now. Next slide, please. So it's not just about good intentions. You have to act on it. You have to ask questions. You have to listen. It's not hard, but it is a habit that needs to be built if you want an environment of psychological safety. And I'm going to reiterate what I said at the beginning. For any relationship of any type to be a truly wonderful, functional relationship, you must have good communication. You cannot have good communication if there's a breach in psychological safety. Period. So, on that harsh note, next slide, please. Thomas B. Cox, I have had the pleasure of working next to for 15 years. And honestly, a lot of this comes from my experience with him. It's a lot of the writing is based on his upcoming book, Mental Models for Best Bosses, and on his Best Boss training. And I had to take the moment to give him a special appreciation because without his knowledge and his training, I would not be here right now. Last slide is, of course, my reference slide. Thank you guys for listening to me today. Thank you for letting me kind of go off script and try to bring this more personal to you. And a big apology for everyone that I traumatized with the math equation.
Well, thank you, Zag, for this awesome presentation. I couldn't see the chat because I was operating the slide, so now I'm looking in the chat. If anyone has any questions for Zag, we have a few minutes for those. You can either unmute yourself or put those in the chat, and I'm scanning as well. Let me see. Let me see.
Sorry, I am seeing the chat. And it's just my heart.
Yeah. I don't see any questions, but I could definitely relate to the example that you provided about having a child with food sensitivity because I live that every day. I have a 13-year-old son with autism and he has ARFID, and that is avoidant food, what is it, restrictive intake disorder. So anytime you try to give him a new food, he's like, yeah. So, and you know, so I deal with that every day. And that's the anxiety that I have. So I can relate to that. And my nervous system is like up and down. So I could relate to what you were saying in terms of psychological safety. And so you provided a lot of insight that will greatly help a lot of people. And we appreciate you for being here and offering your insights. And I also want to thank everyone who is in attendance. We could not have done it without you. Thank you for joining us as well. And I am going to place in the chat links so that if you would like to nominate Zag's presentation for an award, you can do so. Let me go ahead and put that in the chat. And I'll also put the link for the other session so you can just be taken directly there. But thank you for being in attendance today as well. I hope you